In the following tutorial, we're going to take a look at the compiler error codes of ActionScript 3.0. Now this will work in either FlashCS3 or FlashCS4. Of course, I'm using FlashCS4 here. To begin, let's open up the ActionScript 3 error start file, or you can create your own file with just a simple button and be able to accomplish everything else, because everything will be in code. Anyway, just to see what we have on our stage here, if you click on the button, it is a component button. If you double click on that button, you'll notice it goes into all the crazy different sections of that button right here. And that can be important because you'll see some of that playback when we have some errors. And also, if I go back to the main level, you'll notice that I do have an instance name on this, and that's sample_btn. Anyway, I'm going to lock that layer, go to my code layer, make sure I pin that script so everything that I create is on that layer. Now, the compiler errors are really helpful for us to be able to tell what we have going on in our action script. They'll let us know when we have certain errors and possibly what those errors are. And it'll generate the following codes. These are just some of the codes that we're going to be playing with today. But these are the ones that I'd really like you to be able to kind of create a document and describe how you had those errors. And that way you can kind of give yourself a cheat sheet for how to fix when you have those errors, how to fix Flash. So we're going to begin by just typing something into the actions layer here and just see what happens. Now as soon as I start typing, you'll notice one thing is that the letters are either coded to be black or they're going to be blue. Anything that's black is going to be a word that Flash does not understand, and anything that's blue, like stop, means that it will be a word that Flash understands. That means it's a keyword. Now, this is going to be really important because we're going to have to use these color-coded things quite often. Now, just because Flash understands a word doesn't mean that you are writing syntax correctly. For example, I'm going to generate the very first error code here by just putting in STO instead of stop, just STO, and I'm going to go ahead and check the compiler and see what happens here. To test our movie, we'll do Control Test Movie, or I'll use Control Enter pretty much the rest of the tutorials. Now, as soon as we test our movie, you'll notice that we get two problems. One of them is the compiler error shows up, and it describes that we have 1120 access of undefined property STO, and then you'll also notice with our component button that it is malfunctioning over on the left-hand side. So those are two indications, of course, of something that's going on. Now, if you don't have a component error, you might not see, or a component, you might not see this type of funky error, but that's definitely something you see with those. Anyway, in order to go to where this error is, you of course want to read it and try and figure out what it means. It says 1120 access of undefined property STO. So I know that STO is something that Flash does not understand. So if I double click on this, it will actually take me to the place where it found that error, and it will enable me hopefully to try and error check this a little bit better. And I'll know, well, STO is nothing. It doesn't understand what STO is because that's a variable name. So hey, look at this. I'll use stop instead. So let me do Control Enter again. Oh, now we have something else that came up. And this is warning, function value used where type void was expected. Well, what's happening is that we're not putting in the right code here. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that we're going to be using this check syntax as well. And right now, if I click on check syntax, it doesn't show me any errors. So a syntax error doesn't always mean the same thing as a logic error. This right here needs some of the other elements. So it needs my beginning and ending parenthesis and then my semicolon for it to work properly. Now, anything else that I might put in here, such as possibly put in an ending curly bracket, may generate an error. And you'll notice we can generate errors such as this 1084 syntax error just by having our code incorrect when we're creating different things such as just a function. So we just have to make sure that we're using things properly in pairs. And of course here we would have our ending parenthesis to stop that. Now for the next part, we're going to create our typical our function event listener pair, and we're going to get it to work, and then we're going to check it for errors afterwards. So let's begin by creating function myClick. This will be an event colon mouse event, and you'll see that it is coming up with the code hinting. Then I need to end my bracket. I can use the colon void, which means don't pass any information back. And I'm going to do my curly bracket, go down a couple lines, end my curly bracket, go back up. The function is going to be, or the action will be, to trace hello world, and I'll put my semicolon. Then I'll go down a couple lines, and I'll do to the sample underscore btn, and it could say this beforehand. That'd be fine. Add event listener, so I can go to add event listener, and this will be mouse event dot click, and we'll run the myClick, sorry. So there is all of our code. Function myClick, event colon mouse event colon void, and in the curly brackets trace hello world. Then I'm putting that on the sample button. I'm adding an event listener, which is a mouse event dot click and myClick event. So let's try it and see if it does indeed work. So absolutely everything works just great at this point. There is one more event here that I do need to add. Actually, no, I was thinking about it, or error thing I'd like to add, although you probably won't come into it very often. So let's begin creating errors. The very first thing is, let's just say that we misspelled our word function. All right, 1071, which didn't even show up there, actually, as one of the errors that I was showing before. So we might want to add that one. Expected a definition keyword such as function. So it's telling me that it was expecting something I did not type in correctly. I type that in correctly, and it does work. The next part, myClick. Let me go ahead and change that somehow and test again. All right, 1120. This is that undefined property, and it says undefined property myClick. So it means somehow I'm using myClick incorrectly. So I can double click on it or click on the word down here, go to source, and it's showing this is the property it was looking to run. And if I go back up to the function where I'm using it, you'll notice that it is the wrong typing. In the next one, let's see what happens if we put it here wrong. You'll see it the same error again. This time I have access of undefined property myClick with the WK in there. And so both places generate pretty much the same error. Now another error that we might run into is if we do event dot mouse event instead of event colon mouse event. So let's see what we get there. That's the 1084 syntax error, expecting right parenthesis before dot. And so that is a common error. We could put a semicolon and see what happens there, and you'll see that we get the 1084 and we get an 1185, which I didn't have on the list here. So I'll put the colon again. In the next one, I'm going to remove the parentheses around, or quotation marks rather, around hello world, and see what happens there. 1084, I'm getting the same sort of error from that. If I don't have the space, it will give me an undefined property because it sees hello world as a property or a variable that has not been used before. But if I separate it, it sees it as a function or a keyword like function something or other. So if I put my quotation mark around one side, look at how many errors come around. So here's an interesting one. 1095, a string literal must be terminated before the line break. So that can definitely be helpful with that one. We'll fix it, and of course everything's going fine. Another very, very common one, and this is probably one of the most common ones that you'll run into, is if you have not targeted your button. And this can happen, of course, two ways. If you're missing an instance name on your button, or you are targeting a different name than your instance name, you may get the 1120, undefined property. So that's a really, really important one again.